Okay, this is the first time I'll be recording on this phone right here. I'm just going to get a good look at this lighting here. I don't know if you can see the letters on my hat there, um, but I have customized hats, and this is one of them that has the embroidered, personalized text in a blue. It's a blue visor with a black hat with like blue embroidered lettering. Yeah, so this is the Higher Angels Light Scribe. And there's like more on it, okay? But I'll actually see if I can get a close up of it, like right about there. But anyway, yeah. So like it's kind of like referring to the thing about the Better Business Bureau, okay, and the acronym BBB and the bird bath baptism. It seemed to be like it's like okay, the Better Business Bureau is for like the white pages, okay, a bunch of white stuff, okay, and predominantly, that was like a thing that was like a known fact. And the alphanumerics is six, as a matter of fact. Um, and ultimately, like a whole bunch of presidential, like alphanumeric linguistics and analytical and symbolic, um, geographical, I mean, all kinds of alphanumeric and linguistic, analytical, and symbolic, ultimately getting to an Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle government Stargate program. And the alphanumerics is six, it's kind of like in between like the ABC 13 in Houston to ABC 7 in Los Angeles is a difference of six. Okay, the thing with this is that okay, that ultimately, like I've been mentioning like before about the June 14th, 1992 on a Saturday morning, Flag Day, SAT, highest possible score. Yeah, all that information like there then, and this has been the year 2025 in April 2025. Um, there seemed to be like quite a bit, in between the time that seemingly that ultimately resulting in um, a 16 to an 18-month period. And I'd mentioned previously, okay, this is the first time I actually record. I'm recording on this phone. I'm actually trying to make a smooth transition between like all my banking and like YouTube and all the passwords and to the new phone with my new number. I'm in Pearland, okay, but I have a Springdale, Utah area code on my new phone, and this is like the second time that I've used an area code 435 of like Springdale, and it's predominantly originating, predominantly because of Zion National Park, okay, and ultimately because the thing about the Mormon Church is ultimately like Utah, um, and ultimately not necessarily a question of alphanumerics knowing or not knowing, the alphanumerics of an American being 64 or HTTP or, Israel or, what the deal is between, the fact about Israeli being like 73 in Harris or Egypt as compared to, like the American thing about Israel being 64 in HTTP or, any idea of maritime law that might be maybe misappropriation allocation in Mississippi as like Club Med. Um, and what Club Med is. I mean, to like the club as well as like maritime law or what liquidable equity only means. Um, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of like a intellectual easement being used as whether if it's a political reference as Republican or um, Democratic or the thing with this is that it's ultimately getting to some idea of like you know um, I guess if it's really the original. I mean, if there's like a mandatory requirement, like it seemed to be like now my birth year being 1964, it seemed that really that the biblical prophecy that has been referred to as the third and fourth generation, and I'll actually have to clarify certain information, but just the principle of like the third and fourth generation was like a big deal, and ultimately, of great grandparents, and great grandparents, and ultimately, this being it seemed to be like that 1964 seems to be like a landmark somewhere, like I mean, like and somewhere in eternity of English, excuse me, English alphanumeric, and it seemed that as an American involving English in like the United States and and all this information around the Houston, Texas area, including, and I'm going to make this real clear about like a, Lincoln Continental hood ornament in a rectangle being the vertical thing, or Olivia Newton-John singing that song, "You Better Shape Up because She Needs a Man," and ultimately Lincoln Continental hood ornament gets to, Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government Stargate program. And my thought about like Olivia Newton-John's name, her name itself, being like, Olivia is automatically like in my mind, like Mount Olives, Olive and Olivia, yeah. And Newton is almost like the fig leaf, like almost like the Garden of Eden thing, and at the same time, like, at this point in my perception of like, Alpha American linguistics, that Olivia Newton-John and the thing about like a ribeye, a legislative ribeye, like drumstick. I mean, for real. And the difference between like a Garden of Eden ribeye and, like a blue ribbon, grand opening ribeye. I mean, for real, yeah. So, I mean, it seemed to be like a color code between the blue and the green. A province being, the pastel green, and pastel, being the thing about 73 and Harris, yet, it seemed to be like the conversion of like, where the point of origin's really at. And some idea if military time is the degreed or non-degreed, or the non-degreed experiencing some idea of what only intellectual property may or may not be identified or as de facto, or what litigation res habeas corpus is, to some idea of like some presidential debate, and just the name itself of like Ulysses S. Grant presenting the factors of like a student loan combined with a Pell Grant. I mean, it's virtually almost the same principle of like the Mormon Church using the King James Version Bible at the same time. It's almost like the same difference between a student loan representing some idea of it, like even the EBT, electronic benefits transfer, involving what was then food stamps is now been some idea of SNAP food benefits, and like the Lone Star card. I mean, it's the same principle of whether if it's compatible, or some idea like of what immigration custom enforcement means to a vice president network, or whether or not if a patent pending is the only idea of not being a vice president network, or a carbon footprint, or absentee voting. And it seemed to me like whether if anyone knows or not, or a medical power of attorney using fiction and real estate as a deed restriction, or a mechanics lien, but based upon programming. And the thing with this is that ultimately it gets to whether or not if all these issues that seem to be, I mean, manufactured, whether, who knows anyway for them, it seemed to be whether or not if the availability is only the issue of publication, or, television programming, or, what lifespan means in de facto. And it seemed to be that similarly that virtually everything that I've realized and have experienced, it seemed to be like whether or not if anyone even knows if, the idea between annuity or settlement is only knowing or not knowing. Oh God, I lost my majority of my lighting. God. Anyway, I didn't have much time to charge out much up about it, yeah. So let me take a quick look here. Yeah, so like anyway, I want to see if I can do this real quick and do it all at the same time. I should have been a little bit more prepared here, yeah. Yeah, seemingly so, yeah. But anyway, yeah, so like okay, so like anyway, I'll go with it like this right now. But anyway, hopefully it'll be just as yeah, well, anyway, yeah. Okay, let me get a quick look here. Okay, where's it at? Okay, yeah, great. Okay, whatever. Okay, so like anyway, it's kind of like it gets to like, once again, the thing with this is that, the humor about a current, it's really not humor, considering, really everything that's involved, okay? And the thing with this is that, a little bit of humor about a current resident in a coupon, okay? And it's really not humor at the same time, but the thing with this is that, seeing some idea like of a coupon normally associated at on a continental level as a percentile. Um, and with the Colonel Sanders and the deal is about Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, Shadow Government Stargate program, and Colonel Sanders. See all that SAN software involved with like international financial management. Okay. Um, and it seems that really when and where that idea of like um, a hood ornament being my thought of like Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta in that movie Grace, and she sings that song. She better shape up because she needs a man. And really, I mean, at this point, following the chronological direction of like both the Olivia Newton-John and like you know John Travolta, even the Saturday Night Live and the Saturday Night Fever thing about shadow dancing and all the Bee Gees stuff about the songs during the movie Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, and the color, the too much action in the discotheque, okay, and what that is on the toilet as compared to Michael Jackson's thing about hopscotch technology and the atonement of him and his thing about his toes and what the toes is in direction of like the ornament, the hood ornament, yeah, the toes and the towing thing about Y2K, yeah, some on-site direction, yeah. So like anyway, so like Michael Jackson's song Billie Jean, in my mind it presents that deal about hopscotch technology. Yet at the same time, John Travolta presents something a little bit more about the discotheque. Yet Michael Jackson is very much about the thing about the choreography and in that way in that song Billie Jean, it seemed to me it presents the thing about some information that seemed to be pertinent to what hopscotch technology only means to the atonement and ultimately like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind and the communication on a plateau, and all this information that I'm using is like available information. And it seemed to be that ultimately one word in Book of Thessalonians being the word transfiguration, after the third day the Lord Jesus Christ resurrected and went to Mount Olives and ascended from Mount Olives. Okay, is the thing is that Mount Olives is a plateau. Okay, and I think it's Alpha 68. Okay, um, I'll have to think about it real quick. What is that? 16, 26, 27, 28, 29, 49, 54, 55, 76. Anyway, I'll have to actually think about it because I think it may be the way it's spelled, but sounds and pronounced the same. But anyway, in any case, yeah. So like anyway, um, so like the Better Business Bureau is like that the acronym BBB, and everyone knows it's like the white pages and a bunch of white stuff. Okay, and it's almost like the same principle of like going beyond a birth certificate of a what seemed to be like Michael Jackson's thing about the song Billie Jean and the hopscotch technology of the atonement leading to like somewhere in my mind like some transition between the information of Billie Jean's not my lover and like Olivia Newton-John singing a song better shape up because she needs a man, and ultimately it seems to be the combine of like Mobile One graphite between like the birth certificate and almost like the hopscotch technology of like the footprint on the birth certificate, um, and Michael Jackson's off the wall thing about a when and where kind of thing. It seemed to be like being barefoot and walking on a bunch of black stuff in my mind like graphite. And it's like the difference between like RPM on Highway 288 and Pro Bass, Bass Pro. I've seen it both ways. Pro Bass and Bass Pro on Highway 288, including advertisement on television. And okay, it's kind of like a RPM is like an Iowa colony um, on the south side, like a Houston and Pearland. And it's the alphanumeric 132 is presidential as it gets, and the Univision thing is ultimately it gets to like Univision is using the four colors and three of them being the pastel. Um, and I'm not sure if my memory will actually serve me correctly about the pastels, but there is a set of three pastels in the beginning with the black, one black and three pastels, and then towards the end, where they're at and relocated or where they're at like right now, everywhere like about it right now in this area. But the thing with this is that ultimately, the three pastels and a white, and it's like I'm looking at like RPM that way, a proper English grammatical composition, and why one pronoun of the four types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject, And it's almost like, RPM being further south on Highway 288, being more of the subject. Um, and, the why one pronoun of the three types, why one pronoun of the four types, pronouns cannot be used as subject. I mean, it's like RPM representing some idea of like, the black vinyl of like records, in the 60s and 70s, being, the 33, the 45, and the 78 RPM of black vinyl. Um, and at the same time, RPM presents, like the American Idol. I mean, that way, even with like, 1-800 numbers representing what is normally like, I mean, if there's ultimately getting to the transportation about all this information, Alpha 200, a bicentennial drummer, a bicentennial quarter, and even Richard Nixon, or him always, doing the peace sign with the two fingers that he's innocent. And really, it seemed to be like a Lyndon B. Johnson thing somewhere, and I'm not sure if it originates from like the Roosevelt uh, New Deal Act, somewhere between 6 presidential terms between Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt, and what Franklin is in that way of pronunciation of like Harris, and the geographical, I mean, immediate area, um, and Theodore, what the deal is about, 6 presidential terms in office, and somewhere in between, the thought of like the Better Business Bureau being the acronym BBB being alphanumeric 6, and ABC itself, and like the Flag Day, June 14th, 1992, on a Saturday morning at the Mormon Church. I mean, um, I mean, like so verified and documented. And it's kind of like being in a good mood about like quite a bit about what I'm talking about. It's like all that for it is written stuff, and not some funny like real serious like not funny stuff. Okay, the thing with this is that um and yeah, so like that's not funny. Okay, in any case, so like the thing with it is that the Better Business Bureau is about the white pages, okay, and ultimately going through a transition from the black footprint, and I'm almost certain it would almost have to include graphite, and whether it's a compound or a paste, or somewhere in between a compound and a paste that's used for like putting newborn children's like footprint on a birth certificate. I'm almost for certain that it would more than likely be that graphite is the thing in between all this information, between like a footprint to like a copying process involving toner, and getting through a copying process of like paper made in fingerprints into biometrics into the light scribing side, um, and all of it involving like graphite, um, yet a small uh, metallic particle. In electronics, it creates an electrical charge in a magnetic way, and it has an attraction in the copying process that actually lifts the black toner with it to like the drum, okay, and during the copying process, okay, and all the light scribing thing about a copying process involving toner as compared to biometrics is completely not the same. It might sound the same in pronunciation, which is the big deal about alphanumeric linguistics, um, is that the light scribing factor of like biometrics, um, you know, uh, involves not, it doesn't even involve paper like it used to, and it was like that probably generation before the available information was even made available. Okay, it's because kind of like I felt like I've been like OnStar before like the public even knew what OnStar even was for like geographic information systems, or I mean in the way of like um, geographic informations or tracking systems, normally identified like with General Motors like OnStar, or Ford I think it's Starlink. In any case, there for a while I was like studying like telematics. Um, I was actually involved with electronics, a little bit about that, as far as like telematics goes, and normally manufacturers manufacture their own name brand for their make and model, not necessarily limited to the model, but more so to make like General Motors would be like the huge thing in categorization of like OnStar, more so of the motors, not limited to even the name brand. Um, yeah, so like sometimes General Motors overrides like the make, as compared to the make and model. Like General Motors is predominantly, like any make or model would like OnStar. Um, so like in Ford is like a little bit different with I think it's Starlink, But I was studying telematics that way, about geographic information systems and ultimately, like global positioning systems and all this information, but like, like network operations and telematics that way involving geographic information systems and you know, um, network operations centers and certain factors involving, like solar winds and software technology. And I was going with the solar winds for quite some time because of an area on the north side that predominantly uh, used, and as far as like, studying the information, looking at network operations, on the north side of Houston about that and certain other information involving that's Texas Wave Media and like Data Foundry actually presented the information in the beginning like saying software like international financial management, and then like it seemed to convert from like a um, what would be maybe a domestic and monetary viewpoint of what a VPN would only mean to, I mean, if it's a distinguishable difference between a vice president network or a virtual personal network. It seemed to be that like Data Foundry had presented, the SAN software almost in that way, like domestic and monetary, presenting, like the SAN software almost in that way of neighborhoods, not necessarily, the commercial venue of living quarters. In my mind is automatically, kind of like above it in the way of like ergonomics of like, gross national product, and, whether or not if a U.S. patent is, not necessarily going to be, the issue of television program or any possible way of being used as a deed restriction. Um, and it seemed to be, the thing about Marcus Welby and Quincy, I mean, and just a simple, deal about neighborhoods and residuals as monetary and domestic as compared to, some idea of the stainless in some governmental structure presents the high old silver. Um, and, the thing about, whether or not if all that programming between Marcus Welby and Quincy is only the idea of like a 13 band graphic equalizer and the pastel green and the pastel red being used between like impedance and ambience, which seems to be the only two of like night vision that seem to have the significance, ultimately going through an Abraham Lincoln night vision shadow government Stargate program, and some idea of like monetary and domestic as like whether it's degreed or non-degreed, but still the categorization of a neighborhood, in my mind, even a 9-hole golf course, um, no matter what they think of themselves or or anyone else. The thing is that still it doesn't seem to be the idea um, of practical application in every possible way. Or the only thing that really I see sometimes the 9-hole golf course uh, as a neighborhood is that I don't really see it as the grade of a commercial venue of living quarter, um, that is not affected by any medical power of attorney or television programming that presents a deed restriction based upon the perception even of professional witnessing, or the movies protected by the FBI presenting the acronym and what that is or is not to regions. And it seemed to be involving the issue whether or not if the U.S. dollar is the only thought of whether or not if the U.S. dollar is even the issue, or even more so the degree above the categorization of even having a need to be in the bank. And most people might not even realize that even being in the bank is, or even in any kind of way, and not having a direct source. Uh, I don't think it's always limited to you maybe having a right to assemble as an all expense paid card, normally of corporations. The thing is that, uh, having an all expense paid, card of like having a right to assemble is a lot about the annuity side of, corporate law. Although corporate terminology and many perception of like litigation is automatically the result of a settlement. And most people, a lot of people might not, realize or know if Defacto is involved or not, or even if anyone can even prove they know if they themselves are, or what having a right to assemble as class action is and is not, and what class action is and is not to knowing or not knowing. Um, if class action is the only thought of whether if affirmative action is or only a corporate term using business law, um, somewhere between, family law, even making a grade beyond business law, or what would be maybe virtually anyone in any neighborhood of employment making a grade, beyond internet protocol for local area network of maritime law based upon it being, an entire lifetime of like a vice president network and not even realize what K television and K radio or even W television and W radio is really truthfully about. And not being affected by like anything involving either one, either W or like K television. And something, in my mind, it's automatically the freer degrees of like, obviously, born in that, and really about, being involved in television and maybe some idea of Washington being the electronic, God thing more so of the future and, like on this planet, yeah. And, the way I say it is that commercial venues of the living quarter seem to be that symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1, um, between the C and the PTIS to the upper right side of the eye above the pyramid on the backside of the US $1, the symbolic representation. It seemed to be that significance is actually seen and division and together as a combine. Many people might not automatically see it as a telepathic mediation in the sky, but the mental telepathy, modest God and Holy Spirit and all that stuff. I mean, it so much about it is like not the way it's led to be believed in the Christian religion, and I'm almost certain that it may be the same for like really virtually any religion. The idea of like heaven and all that good stuff. But the thing with it is that many people's perception doesn't normally identify religion as constitutional law, or you can believe anything you want based upon available information, and there's a place for like anyone that decides that believing whatever it is they want, whether it's a degreed or non-degreed issue, is really ultimately what direction. It's not everyone's personal idea of like fault, and fault doesn't necessarily have to be the word. Getting in a direction and not experiencing some idea or even knowing of how information is being used as an intellectual easement that generates some idea, whether it's royalties itself or some idea of as a claim of ownership being used, and whether it's known or not known, what if the owner of the rights itself is the person they themselves, or what it is about their own information that generates some idea of like royalties, or whether or not if it's some idea of like garnishment as a settlement and somewhere in litigation and de facto and res habeas corpus, and what that is in television programming. If it's just the idea of turning television on, if it's considered an automatic deed restriction based upon like not making the grade, I mean like already of entire lifetimes and generations of like the entire freaking continent, okay? And ultimately now it just seems to be that's my thing about having a commercial venue and getting above everything about it, because it's not like anything other than like thinking like a multi-billionaire and having a multi-billionaire like millionaire way of living and not affected by like anything that's like I know that's already happened. And ultimately it seemed to be like the Better Business Bureau being the white pages and a bunch of white stuff. It's ultimately some idea of like information that was like 1411 for like a directory, okay? I hadn't been around for quite some time, and maybe it's only a landline involving like wires and like in the ground as far like excuse me, communications with like telephone. The thing is, okay, is that all this information, I mean ultimately it had been based upon experience and like when and where certain issues had happened, and obviously demanded standard like requiring participation of like a 6 month later after a phone call, and now it seems to be like a Madonna song borderline, right? It's obviously in compound in my mind like automatically with like the Pink Floyd The Wall, and some idea of like a sonic boom and a roar, and it seemed to be like that picture on Pink Floyd's album cover The Wall. It seemed to be like out of thin air in the sky and a roar with a sonic boom, and out of thin air is like coming through the wall like a bunch of traffic. And in any case, it seemed to be like almost like the Madonna song about all the information it presents that's only in my mind involving like supplemental security, and like the obviously bonita, and what the deal is about supplemental security normally involving some idea of like a disability, and it doesn't even even have to be that, but it presents the information of geographics that involve like electronic scooters, um, electric mobility, for a hardship or a duration, or I don't even like saying handicap, but the thing with this is that um I've read and seen all the information about supplemental security being just simply not having a source of income, and that's not some idea any other than like anyone like knowing it, presenting it and getting it that way. I mean, I'm assuming, wasn't exactly the way I got it, um but I mean, it's like how me getting supplemental security, I mean, I wouldn't even accept it for like 2 years. I mean, it was like beyond like not cool about like not one thing about it. um and ultimately I got so upset, that ultimately, I got to the point to where that I just went ahead and went through the process, okay, and got it, okay. Um, but, but for about a 2 year period, I mean, how everything happened, I mean, it was so like far beyond like not cool. Ultimately, being now the thought of like a bird bath baptism, June 14th, 1992, and really I already knew when it started happening that hey, it's like something's like really not cool about the way things are happening. Um, in any case, like the Flag Day is ultimately now the Six Flags thing, and it seemed to be like the Better Business Bureau now, the acronym being it's easy as 1, 2, 3, yeah, like Michael Jackson, huh? ABC 1, 2, 3, yeah, sure, and think about ultimately the atonement, and real quick about it while I'm thinking about it is about the Lockheed Martin, the 2 arrows, the 4 lines, and the 3 intersecting axes. Okay, and the Lockheed Martin thing, it seemed to be like like on a row. Okay, and the state, federal, local authorities like the thing about a governmental structure. Okay, and the thing with this is that arrow is what it's referred to. Okay, the thing about the wall. Okay, and the color, it being the beige, like the pronunciation, and international financial management, and just the design of a symmetrical, asymmetrical on either side of the wall. Okay, and it ultimately led to a bunch of alignments. Okay, and ultimately now this being the year 2025 as compared to back then, it was a time frame for like 19, really because of a baptism. Okay, before like any demanded requirements of like going through a circuit. Okay, um, but really, ultimately, because of a baptism, had led to not many days hence experience, and then an absolutely go on to find and look for an answer, and ultimately, uh, got to the alphanumerics only. Really, I mean, it was just as simple as taking alphanumerics seriously. I mean, as seriously as A1 steak sauce, and hey, wake up, I mean, like automatically, immediately about alphanumerics. Okay, and when I wasn't finding what I was wanting to find in the King James Version Bible over an experience, that ultimately, before I even realized anything about the US $1, and actually I got a knock on the door and some guy, and I'm not even sure if they live in this area or not, but in any case, it was like right after the baptism. Yeah, so like I guess the awareness of like knowing something about that baptism and some experience not many days hence is probably the result of that guy knocking on my front door way back then in 1992 about handing me a $1 bill and just like walking off. Okay, and I'm like almost for certain now that that's exactly all it was, is the perception of like knowing, hey, it just happened, of some like telepathic awareness. Okay. Well, anyway, so like and that's all it was just like a perception of like spiritual witnessing. I mean, the perception of personality, and like like altitude in the sky, like all around, like like a professional witnessing, and different personalities and emotions and all the stuff like all around, and I mean for real. Okay, and and it's kind of like I was laying in bed. Okay, and then I had this thing about the that ultimately led to like the heart god thing, and the alphanumerics is 78. Okay. um in any case, so like anyway, so like it led to like to the alphanumerics. Okay, and ultimately after months and months and months and months actually looking about it, ultimately finding the U151 and mental telepathy minus God and all that stuff about the Holy Spirit, secret service in Jesus Christ, and it goes on and on. Subliminal message, uh, being alphanumerics 177 and mental telepathy 177, or telepathic power minus 26, and God came, card, lie, dog, and all that Z 26 stuff, and um the difference between like a persuasive technique of thinking as compared to, some idea. But anyway, so like I was wanting to focus on the acronym Better Business Bureau because it's the alphanumeric 6. Likewise, in addition, a bunch of presidential stuff, okay? In any case, so it seemed to be ultimately, my thought of like the psychic war, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover up, okay? Like a bird bath baptism, the cover's up. And the guy on the cover of the book, okay? And the author's last name is Morehouse, okay? And ultimately, mooring is like automatically, like navigating, like ships and yachts and docking a boat, even mooring. It's like maritime law, okay? And yet, the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover up of the top secret CIA Stargate program. I mean, it's ultimately, now, I mean, without a doubt, okay? And so to this day, I mean, like, not one word, okay? And this is in the year 2025, okay? And ultimately, even the UFO sightings and fields leaving impressions in the field of a bunch of circles, okay? The thing of it is that the wall in Brazoria County, County Road 45, I mean, I just decided, like, I'd been there, like, several times for, like, months each time, and my first thought was, like, hey, what kind of stuff is that, And that's all I thought about it, at the time. But there was, like, a second time and a third time, and the thing with this is that I decided that I wasn't going to just, like, I mean, sit there and do nothing, okay? So, like, I'm, like, taking a legal pad and using the edge, okay? And from the exact opposite side of the shelf, which is like two triangles up under, the shelf. It's like a real small one with two triangles automatically. It's like the pi r squared and the 6-point star, the Israeli flag. Yet the triangle of electronic schematic of a delta combined, in the big mouth of the river and misappropriation and allocation of the Mississippi. Yet at the same time, the plateau in Mount Olives, okay? Or a plane horizon in an altimeter, a barometric altimeter of condensing residuals, or the Orion performance monitoring with the hot air balloons, with a different color of hot air balloons, presenting the condensation and evaporation based upon temperature and altitude is their demanded requirements of like a rainbow, and ultimately all this information about the pastels is predominantly of the International Electronic Engineering colors of like wires and color code. They're not all pastel, but a lot of them are, okay? And the thing with this is that a rainbow measured in nanoluminance is the same point of pastels predominantly of electronic light emitting diodes, okay? And digital readout displays. Is that that information, even like with Robin Williams and Pam Dauber on Mork and Mindy, him, using a V twin, like Mr. Spock in Star Trek going, hey, and the size about 909 is like a, like a V twin. Size about 909, and the thing about the V twin is like 909 is like the only two of the 13-band graphic equalizer, the pastel red being impedance, and the pastel green of ambience, and the 13 being the alphanumeric 99 and telepathic, and all the 13 stars above the eagle is ultimately, in my mind, the deal about the 13-band graphic equalizer in television programming. And somewhere between that size about 909 and Richard Nixon is like the hypothetical metaphor of a double bass drummer at the same time with the size about 909 and the V twin. I mean, Robin Williams and Pam Dauber and like Mork and Mindy, Mork from Ork, I mean, for real. And the thing about it being in Boulder, Colorado, presents, Boulder being like the idea of font size, okay? And The Rock, and, Bob Seger and today's Chevrolet, like a rock thing about, and, even like a Petra song, I am on the rock, yeah. But anyway, ultimately, Rock Me Amadeus, okay? And it seemed to be that the Rock Me Amadeus thing is about, international financial management. Somewhere like in a narration with like Orson Welles narrating like Nostradamus narrated by Orson Welles. It presents the issue of like Rock Me Amadeus. In a way, it seemed to be it's almost like the rectangle of Lincoln Continental hood ornament at a 90 degree, going through an Abraham Lincoln night vision, shot a government Stargate program because, like high-rise buildings, and that was like the memory, that it was like several factors of remembering something only because of like television being involved in world news and national news, and even like Microsoft presenting screensavers. It's really when I really knew for the first time. I mean, without a doubt, without any doubt, that was really the first time was when Microsoft had presented the screensavers and like grouping as a sequence as a presentation, like PowerPoint does. But it was like Microsoft presenting different types of screensavers, and Europe's Most Wealthiest Museum was like one of them. Okay, and it showed that inside of the hallway with like the granite gray and the white ivory, like whether if it's a combine of marble and granite, or if it's all granite, but it's like a checkerboard design with like a white statues in a hallway, and identified as like Europe's most wealthiest museum, and it's kind of like a, at the first I was kind of like thinking, hey, that looks like a funeral home, and I'd realized I was taken there, okay, um, and I was almost kind of like in disbelief, and then I was thinking that it's like that's like a museum for like dead people, and it being like added preservatives and byproducts, kind of like preserved, for like a museum. Well, anyway, I don't remember anything other more than that hallway. Um, and I'm almost for certain that it's somewhere, and somewhere that for it is written of governors. It's like for it is written. It's like 4 words, okay. For it is written. Written being 109 in governor, okay. Or YouTube, okay, 109. Or Los Angeles or LA being like linguistic alphanumerics, okay. Somewhere it's written. I'm almost for certain and I'm not sure if it's the location that would be somewhere in my mind, like of a Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze in a movie, The Seventh Sign, because some of the information, some things that were like going on that has happened, and even a memory, and I don't like dwelling upon the thought of like a military bureau determined or the mind's eye based upon really factors that obviously as obviously somebody like really not kind of like cool, okay. The thing with this is that the mind's eye is probably the only thing about it that could be possibly in any kind of way cool. I mean, if it just has to be, and ignored in an academic way, not necessarily because of the experience or how like all that crap happened. Okay. In any case, okay. So like in any case, so like or the amphibious thing about some idea about being some idea about it. But anyway, or the front lines of the beach run based upon the vice president network. Okay. Um, or carbon footprint or absentee voting. I mean, if absentee voting is really getting to the point of a military bill to determine of the mind's eye, I mean, would that be the ultimate absentee voting? So, like, what came first, the egg or the chicken? So, I mean, is it really the principle of the Easter egg basket, or is it really the principle of maybe the elastic stork, um, or is it shish kebabs and combined with like is that a can of Van Camps and an Easter egg basket having a right to assemble trying to find themselves, or is that like is that like a jarhead of the elastic stork, or what's that supposed to mean? Absentee voting. So, like, ultimately, somewhere in my mind, a police front as compared to a storefront or some idea of like the elastic store representing some, jarhead, um, in a way, of huh, some not funny stuff. But the thing is that ultimately it seemed to be that really, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to like the mind's eye being the ultimate idea of what the absentee is or is not, somewhere in political science, and all that forward is written stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to self-destruct it because I have something to say about it. Okay. I mean, what would be to expected of not saying it? Would it be the ultimate decision that it's like absentee? Like it was a decision that was made based upon perception of persuasive technique of thinking, or had it been they themselves, or in proper English numerical composition in alphanumeric linguistics, maybe had it been they themselves, experiencing, what it means to be intellectual property, and what is it that the absentee is like? Is it a known or not known fact of absentee voting, or a carbon footprint, or somewhere between like California being like the purple side of a carbon footprint, um, or Oldsmobile Delta 88. In any case, so like it seemed to be like whether or not if the mind's eye is really I mean is there like a mandatory requirement for the mind's eye to be some idea of like a amphibious and some spiritually uplifting experience based upon a baptism somewhere like in my mind in world history, somewhere of like eternal treasuries, and I just happen to be like somewhere in on this planet during some eternal thing about the entire freaking universe. Okay, so like I just decided to talk like this. Okay, because obviously I just take it upon myself to feel like sounding like I'm going to be the one doing it. Okay, I mean not that I chose that this very word out of my mouth at this very second as a protected estimate option in the future, but would I really know the difference of what counterbalancing the Earth for perfected season changes actually means? Counterbalancing the Earth for perfected seasonal changes, really? And so, like, is that like terminology somewhere like and returning it to its rightful owners? So, like, in somewhere in intellectual property, okay, or based upon the experience, had it been they themselves? I mean, so like, where's the compliment? I mean, is it in progress? I mean, or is that like terminology of like programming? So, like, I mean, is it ultimately getting to like whether or not if any distinguishable factors of de facto is going to be the idea of whether it's annuity or settlement based upon whether or not if litigation is termed as corporate, or de facto defining the meaning only what lifespan is based upon whether if any particular person or any easement being used with a meaning and value and content, and what the meaning and value and content only means based upon the easement being used, such as maybe the holy temple of oneself, okay, or some like ecclesiastical venue, of corporate venue, of like teleprompting the mere words out of my mouth at this very second, okay. Live in Pearland, Texas. Yay, alright, yeah. So, like, hi, my name is Wade. I'm a drummer. I sing too. But yeah, there's like, what is all this stuff like going on, huh? So, so like, in any case, okay. So, like, I'm really thinking about really staying calm, okay? I mean, is there like any real reason not to stay calm? oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's really nice of you, then, yeah. So, like, anyway, okay. In any case, so like I was thinking about that because it seemed to be like really ultimately, the thing about a commercial venue of living quarters, um, somewhere in my mind is some category beyond the thought of monetary and domestic, or like any neighborhood based upon what only a consumer report would only mean, involving some idea of like a vice president network of K television and W television and W radio and K radio, and get a television network beyond the thought of like categorization of money. Um, in my mind somehow would be the ergonomic factor of like gross national product. I mean, I'm assuming that the United States presents a patent in that way of, a patent, not necessarily a patent pending, as some idea of like loss prevention or some method of banking as a checking account or an endorsement, um, or some idea of like whether or not absentee voting and registration is only having fair use of managing intellectual property yet not claiming ownership, and maybe whether or not of returning it to its rightful owners is the only idea of whether or not if the who knows anyway form is really the only idea of a professional witness involving whether or not if the FBI is really just an issue of like protecting what a region, or maybe the option as a protected estimate as maybe region zero or region one, or is that like computer programming of binary numbers presenting the option of whether or not that being on the front lines of the beach ride is only an issue of a birth certificate or the who knows anyway form of citizenship and birthrights, um, or the graphite and some idea of having a white footprint going beyond based upon experience. It seemed that me being a drummer, okay, and ultimately some idea going through what is in my mind human civil rights, identifying itself going through a circuit like you just writing anything to like Washington D.C. Me personally, it was like a whole bunch of overabundant amount of like alphanumeric equations, okay, to like virtually any and everywhere in Washington D.C., including obviously the White House and the Pentagon, and virtually anywhere, and directing it to the U.S. Capitol. And it seemed to be the thing about it's amazing that the only information about the human capital, finding the information in the blue books or in the law library, even getting the United States Capitol address or any information about the U.S. United States U.S. Capitol in Washington D.C. Finding that information, I mean, wasn't even in The law library going to a circuit through so many locations, it's unreal. Yet it presents the blue pamphlets, what would normally be identified as maybe pending, publication, the newest of pamphlets of the blue in a law library. Okay, even the directories identified more so the blue in a law library. What is normally white, not in the law library, is normally blue in the law library of directories of business to business. Um, Associated more so of city administration more so than if it's going to be the idea of like sole proprietors or having the right to assemble as a franchise or a network or an incorporation. Maybe the thought of an incorporation being made only because of de facto, or what geographic options is to a demographic area, or what only availability means in economics, and what it shows as some idea of whether, if that's even considered de facto, whether what lifespan about it is only the idea of ergonomics or geographic attachment, or what only availability means in importing and exporting. And somewhere in between immigration, custom enforcement, it seemed to be that the vice president network focuses more so on domestic and monetary than it does like gross national product, or the hardware side of what governmental structure only means to, the high O silver, or somewhere in between, like Marcus Welby and like Quincy, between like Marcus Welby being like a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate, whether or not if a deed restriction is the ultimate thought of leading to Quincy or sequencing. Quincy, it's hard to believe, a medical examiner, ultimately quantum, okay? Sequencing ultimately gets to quantum. The Alpha 107 military diners club, okay? The Consumer Report Price Index, whether if the North American Free Trade Act is only just a breath of fresh air, okay? Or what all that geospatial information technology is, and GIT in the Alpha 36, or chase and oil, or predominant issue like shadow government, predominant color inside of state statutes annotated, whether participating factors knows it or not, and boycott embargo that way space exploration is ultimately years of like studying it, and and normally circuits are not taught really truthfully to any level. It's more so based upon an experience. I mean, ignoring it would be not even really even able to say anything about it. I mean, it's been like 35 years, okay? Um, or thinking it would even be anything other than so me being a drummer, okay, is automatically me with like just this is just one laser you're seeing on me right now, with all the patterns and rotation and automation and sound activation, and that is just one, okay? And I mean, that is one of the best ones, I mean, available. What you're seeing on me like right now, okay, it's like a little red aluminum cylinder handheld laser that I have as a portable, mounted to a portable stand for like putting it anywhere for like my drums, okay? But I have like two of those, like what you see right there, and a whole bunch of like 3D animation and lasers, strobes, and fog machine, and all the stuff you see me on my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY at YouTube.com. And I'm fixing, okay, this is the first time I've actually recorded anything on this particular phone. I'm actually trying to transition and get my Reasons Bank thing coordinated and change it, because like right now, previously with like Cricket Wireless, okay, I had a Utah number based upon only the information about Zion being 1,000 years apiece, and like Springdale, Utah being Zion National Park. It's just like a Mormon thing, okay? And ultimately Grover Cleveland on the US $1,000 bill, okay? And 1,000 years apiece in Zion and all that information. Ultimately, in geographics is like Springdale, Utah, representing some idea of the 1,000 years apiece, okay? In Zion being the alphanumeric 64 that way, in HTTP or ratio // okay? Or the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and the ISS and the SSI and the International Superstar and Supplemental Security Income. And, I'll get to the PPI, the Mississippi, and the PPO, and the HMO, when I feel like it later. But right now, it seems to me like, like right now, my deal about the Better Business Bureau is the deal about the bird bat baptism, and ultimately the white pages, and ultimately, going beyond biometrics is ultimately, the white pages of like LightScribe. Going beyond the biometrics, okay, is what the deal is about even the white pages and PaperMate 56 is 10, okay? And ultimately, that being the alphanumerics of 94 and annotated adoption and abortion and the Roe v. Wade thing, okay? And even litigation and enrich habeas corpus and what de facto is in that way of seemingly the intellectual duration of what lifespan only means, of what de facto only is or is not somewhere between business and corporate law, or the degree of like being above the categorization of money or any banking system based upon a signature and identity and participating factor. Most people might not automatically see themselves below the equator because of their own endorsement of their own like employment check or even personal check. The thing with this is that most people getting an employment check doesn't automatically see themselves as non-degreed, um, or potentially like a vice president network, or would even know the difference, or even if it's going to matter, even if they do, based upon what having fair use only means in international law, ultimately originating from some idea of like intellectual property. Normally, intellectual property is automatically some idea of a compact disc, normally of entertainment, for like most people anyway, or some degree level like brands um, on a compact disc, or a DVD as a motion picture, identifying reasons more so. And it's kind of like whether or not if the FBI has an issue with acronyms, or not, or representing reasons, or a movie being protected by the FBI is only the option of whether or not if the acronym FBI is going to be a Foreign Bureau of Intelligence or some idea of a Family Business Intelligence or the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I mean, just that one word, federal, is automatically the U.S. dollar, but it's an acronym. You see it all the time. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the idea of protecting what the content is of a movie, if that's going to be the issue of the birth certificate or a carbon footprint or absentee voting of a vice president network, like every day when you turn your K television on, okay? Or even W television. Some idea of like W television wouldn't be normally the thought of being some presidential PG-13 rating of presidential governors, and like parental guidance. Or some idea of like urban and suburban, whether or not if the third world is only some idea, oh, heaven forbid. Oh my God. I mean, there's 1040 EZ form involved. Oh my God, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. Had it been they themselves, yeah, sure, yeah. And all the color codes of like the Air Force One, President of the United States, okay. But the thing with this is that ultimately it seems to be getting to, like once again, the Better Business Bureau being the bird bat baptism, and it seemed to be that the title of the book, Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up, the big deal about a bird bath. And the top secret, yeah, is unidentified bird bat baptism, a flying saucer. Yeah, landing in the field, leaving an impression of circles, okay? And it seemed to be the only thing about the one wall when I decided to get serious about, doing something about the wall and using a legal pad for the edge, okay? And hopefully, like here recently, like immediately, it's like the Aerosmith song, Living on the Edge, because, like Microsoft presented the Edge um, as a browser as compared to the Safari. Um, the thing about, even the American Express Bluebird card with the gold edge, seemingly the McDonald's golden arches about the golden equator at a 90 degree, a point of origin in military time. And the thing with this is that the American Express Bluebird card is a 15-digit number with the gold stripe. And I'm not real sure if that's ultimately some idea as a projected estimate option in the future, or what innovation leading the way only means to cutting edge technology. Aerosmith talks about living on the edge, okay? I mean, I had the card, and it's a prepaid card. The thing with this is that I received it and I was using it as a prepaid card because, like, I'm like really not thrilled about being in the bank or having a checking account with a 16-digit number. I mean, I am so not liking 16-digit numbers. It's unreal. So, like, I finally found the American Express uh, Bluebird prepaid card with 15 digits, and I was like using it. And now all these issues are being presented, like Capital One. It's like a bunch of financial institutions is like battling over maybe the information that I've been presenting on YouTube. or face value, deciding that going beyond MP3 format of audio and putting the MP4 with audio and video like on YouTube, it was predominantly me not going to, have anything about this to say about like it in any kind of way anyway. It was just about me being with me on my drums with like my lighting and the lasers as a standard, as a music video like portfolio of the standards I chose for myself as a drummer and believe me, a singer as well. But the thing with this is that it's still not my original music, yet that's my standard as a drummer, really even a singer. Although, I'm not going to sit here and claim that everything everyone's singing about or what they themselves are about is everything that I'm about. And likewise, I'm sure that me, using a lot of bands' music and what I'm having to say in here really shouldn't be a problem. But the thing with this is that really, some of the things that are involved with it seem to be that whether or not if an international space station is ultimately, maybe I'm not sure about everything that's involved with it, or even have a need or concern. Maybe it should or shouldn't. Considering everything that I have to say about it. The thing with this is that really, as a musician, I mean, a lot of that's my whole entire point about being on YouTube right now, and television. As a matter of fact, I mean, my thought about direct TV and satellite television. See, Chase in the Houston, Texas area, and to the extent, I mean, if it's just local in the way of Houston, Texas, or statewide, or just the thing about in between Los Angeles and Houston, or thinking about the April 213 in Galveston County and the Z71 of like Chevrolet Silverado and Pearland, and ultimately think about April 213, the area code 213 in Los Angeles, okay, and all the information combined with like the carbon footprint in California being 88, and what that is to absentee voting and all the stuff about, the mind's eye ultimately getting to, the deal about carbon footprints and absentee voting, and programming and all that information. But anyway, so like I was really wanting to focus on it because it seemed to be that the I know I'm starting to like talk like faster and faster and like jump from subject or topic. Let me rephrase that topic. Yeah, I don't want to sound like a thoroughly trained diction, idiot, and call it, a subject. Oh my God, yeah, like I'm on a toilet, giving credentials, that surpass my own expectations. Yeah, all right, yeah. So like anyway, so like yeah, so like anyway, so like it seemed to be that really, for a while, it seemed to be that the Better Business Bureau was not automatically in my mind of like mooring the Moore House. Okay, it's the title of the author, and it is the title of the author on Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up the top secret CIA Stargate program. And and now it's like Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, Shadow Government Stargate program, and what a bird bat baptism has meant of like June 14th, 1992, on Flag Day and Six Flags, and whether or not it pledged allegiance to the flag is only Six Flags in the way of the Alphabetics of 52 and the Vice President Network, meaning the entire freaking world of every president of like, I mean, if it's like including like the idea of English, even translation of like, the categorization of money or some idea of like some current event and in the form of like an endorsement, or participating factor as like an entrance exam as an endorsement. Most people don't automatically identify endorsing their own employment check or endorsing any form of check, whether it's even annuity or a settlement or a reimbursement or a gift or, I mean, for real, whether if that's some idea of an entrance exam of naivety, being accused of agreeing to watch television that is free, that there's been a contractual perception that endorsing has been some idea of an entrance exam of Vice President Network, and like never hear a word about it. An entire generation, like hundreds of years of this, okay? Not ever being told anything about it. Like endorsing an entire employment history has led to a personal checking account, and like a VPN is only the simple difference between a Vice President Network and who has the option as a projected estimate of whether if a VPN is a Vice President Network or a virtual personal network, penetrating the secured front lines of like a zip code and fashion statements, okay, in relationship between architecture and platform, or some like 9 degree of some golden equator in relation and embedding encryption. So like, what are you on, okay? So like for real, okay. In any case, so like it seemed to be like really, the Morehouse is presenting the idea of maritime law in coordination with the baptism and that guy underwater on the cover page of the book, Psychic War, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and ultimately getting to the bird bath baptism and all the information it's going to. And I'm already going on like an hour and 5 minutes and like, God, like 17 seconds like right now. And like I really need to go ahead and kind of limit it. I mean, I could probably talk for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, simply and easily without having to take a break. I mean, and then like pick right up where I left off, yeah. But anyway, so like anyway, it's already going on like an hour and 5 minutes right now. But I want to include that about the Better Business Bureau and the bird bath baptism and the Abraham Lincoln night vision and ultimately, the Colonel and the Ajax language and the black and white thing and and the RPM of like, Iowa Colony, ultimately, alphanumerics of like, Univision and presidential and all the way proper English numerical composition of why one type of pronoun of the 4 types of pronoun is going to be used as a subject. I mean, it's like RPM on 288 in Iowa Colony and all the way to like Univision and what Univision is to Pro Bass and Bass Pro involving graphite. And I mean, fishing reels, I mean, for real, as a lubricant as compared to Mobile One in graphite, or even the footprint of a birth certificate involving graphite and getting to the light scribe side of a white footprint and beyond that of like biometrics and light scribe that way. But anyway, so like I wanted to clear that because it seemed to be something that I'm thinking about. I'm going to get this uploaded to like YouTube. And this is the first one that I've actually done on, it's a new phone. I just activated it like a couple of days ago. I'm trying to actually get all my personal like videos like you're seeing me like doing right now on my videos that I have on YouTube, but it's like more so showing that whether or not if the phone and the IMEI number is presenting the issue of networking or some idea of duration of lifespan, a Cricket Wireless or some idea of like a lifespan in Defacto in my life, okay, or some idea like what it means in corporate terms as whether or not if litigation is as and original habeas corpus is some idea of legal media, being some idea like a EA Sports manufacturing an instantaneous protected estimate option in the future, and maybe not recognized as post production and editing. I mean, in a blink of an eye. I mean, not funny crap. I mean, for real, okay. So like I mean, the NFL. Everyone that's ever seen the NFL, with instant replays. I mean, in a blink of an eye. I mean, seeing all those different angles and options. I mean, that way, and not even realizing editing really doesn't have to be involved. But really, who would know the difference? I mean, it's still the term editing, yet it's perceived as an instant replay with options, but not considered editing. Yet, I mean, in reality, it is and it is not. Okay, and that's the thing that seemed to be like going on in my mind. That capability of like National Football League having those instant replays, and I mean at that speed of light, blink of an eye thing of like virtually every impossible angle and option on the entire planet in this universe in a blink of an eye. Okay, and somewhere in my mind, it's like something maybe not cool about EA Sports and like YouTube. It's like my idea of like legal media, auditing legal media. I've already heard a little bit already. It's like already like something like, it's supposed to be like everything's supposed to be cool about it. Yeah, everything's supposed to be like cool about, everyone like being on YouTube about themselves, right? I mean, it's supposed to be cool. Not really, the idiots feel like knowing or not knowing when and where. You know what I'm talking about, okay? But in any case, so like anyway, so I was like kind of thinking that might not necessarily be as cool as it may seem. I guess I mean, have you driven a Ford lately, huh? So ultimately, it gets to the supplemental security income and some idea of economics of what's cool and what's not. Um, so like anyway, it's like it's already. I don't even know what time it is. really at all. It's probably somewhere around. I'm assuming. I'm gonna look later. I'm trying to find my watch. I just got a watch. Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm trying to look at it. I'm trying to watch my watch. Yeah. But anyway, I took it off because yeah, because like when I like go through my lessons doing my drumsticks like I always do. I'm trying to get a strap, a Velcro strap for it. But anyway, I'm having to take it off because it's like presenting the little bit of issue there. But anyway, it's like anyway, it's already going like an hour and 10 minutes, and I'm gonna leave it at that right there and get this uploaded. Okay, talk to you later.